And every time I would go by there, I would visualize my books being on the shelves of the store. And when I was visualizing this end product at my house, I would see it as already done, and the books were sitting on the shelf. And I would hear people talking. I would see them go up and pick the books up, take them up to the checkout stand, and pay for them. I was putting reality into it. I was putting energy into it and life into it, because the books were not published, but I saw it as an end result. And as I went about sending this out to all the different people, incidentally, in the meantime, I was busy writing. I was writing articles I had a weekly article for the newspaper. I was writing magazine articles and sending them off. I was paying my dues as a writer, learning about writing and the mechanics of writing, going to writers' conferences. I was doing all these things that it takes to make yourself become a writer. Nothing will happen sitting at home in your chair. You have to put the energy into anything in order to create it. This is the way the energy works. Well, anyway, as I kept visualizing these in the bookstores, and I was going about sending it out to many different places, my daughter came home one day, and she said she had been in a New Age bookstore that she likes to go to. And just looking on the shelves at the books, on this one shelf above what she was looking at, she said she saw 3 books sitting there. And nonchalantly, she just said, "Oh, those are Mama's books." And then she looked away. Then she realized what she had said, because the books weren't published. It was just a spontaneous remark. "Oh, those are Mama's books." But then she looked back at the shelf. The shelf was empty. There weren't any books sitting there. Well, when she told me this, I knew what was happening. I think you can realize it too. This meant the books were beginning to become solid. They were beginning to materialize. They were beginning to come into our dimension. They were beginning to become a reality. They were real enough that somebody could see them. So this meant it was happening, and it was going to happen. So I knew then, there was no doubt in my mind, that the books would be published. And at that time, after 9 years, I had my first publisher. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of that, because it turned out to be a bad experience. But I found out even bad experiences have their places, because my first 2 books to be published were the first 2 volumes of Nostradamus. They were published in 1989. Now, once I'd made this commitment, there was no way going back on it then, and it became a very exciting reality. The books, it was very important that they came out in 1989, because they contain the most accurate interpretation of the Nostradamus prophecies that have ever been written. And by coming out in 89, they came out before the events began to happen. You can say anything after the fact, but they were out before the events began to happen, so it was validation. Even today, after they've gone through, 10 reprints, people will say, "Look at the original copyright date," and you'll see these were out before the events began to happen. So this first publisher had his role to play. He had his part to play in the whole scenario, and it was a learning experience for me. And it ended up then, in 1991, I formed my own company to keep the books from disappearing and from just going into non-existence. I formed my own company, and I did many things at that time that people say were absolutely impossible for a writer to do. But I know I had help from the other side, and this is the way things go when you believe and you know you can create. But another unusual thing did happen after Volume 1 came out. I got a letter from a woman who said she was in the bookstore, and on the bookshelf she saw Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the Nostradamus. These are the books called Conversations with Nostradamus. And they are now a 3-volume set. But she saw Volume 1 and Volume 2 on the shelf. She picked them both up, carried them up to the cashier, and was going to buy them. Then she decided, well, I'll get Volume 1 today, and I'll come back later and get Volume 2. So she put Volume 2 back up on the shelf. Then she went back the next week to get Volume 2, and it wasn't there, and they told her it's not been published. So she wrote to me and wanted to know what was happening. Did the government decide to take these books off of the shelves and out of print, or what? Because she knew it was real. She'd held it in her hand. And I wrote her back and told her, no, I know what's happening. I said, because I was in the process of writing the book. It was not finished yet and had not gone to the printer. But I told her about the first example of my daughter seeing the books in the bookstore before they were printed. And I told her, that is what's happening. You're seeing it. It's becoming a reality, even though it wasn't finished yet and it was not printed. This is an example of how we do move in and out between these different dimensions. And as we go along on these shows, I'll be talking a lot. My new books, I go into a lot about other dimensions and our exposure to these different realities. But that story really made me think. And I've asked this at a lot of my lectures. It was real. The woman held it in her hand. What would have happened if she had bought it and taken it home with her? Would it have disappeared when she got home? Someone said maybe she would find that she had bought something else. I think it would really have messed up the store's inventory if it was a book that they didn't really have in the store. But what would have happened? Could she have done it? Could she have taken it home, or would it have disappeared along the way? I don't know, but she definitely held it in her hand. I've had another man wrote and told me he saw books in a catalog and was going to order them before they were published. And then he went back to find the catalog, and they were not in there, so he couldn't order them because they hadn't been published yet. There's so many strange things out there. We are interacting all the time with these things. And the people who tell me these things can't possibly happen and can't be real, I wonder, where's the magic in their lives? Because I'm involved in so much of these strange and unusual that to me they're very, very real. I know these things happen. I'm constantly interacting with them. So if these things are happening to you, don't let people think you're crazy or say you're crazy, because they are happening, and more now. It seems now, as we're going into the raising of the vibrations and the raising of the frequencies, as we go into the new dimensions, the veil is becoming thinner and thinner, and more people are, I should say, seeing behind the veil. We are having more of these unusual experiences that we can't explain because the veil is becoming thinner. I get hundreds and hundreds of emails and calls and letters, and people are always telling me that they say, I want to tell you this, but people will think I'm crazy. And I said, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know who to tell my story, because everybody's going to think I'm crazy. And I said, I've read your books. You're the only one that I can talk to. And then they'll tell me a story that I've probably heard many times before. But wherever they're living, there's nobody they can talk to. Nobody has ever had these things, and they say they're crazy. Believe me, the things I've heard, they're not crazy. It just means we're operating on a different frequency, I guess you would say. We're closer to these things. They are happening to many, many people all over the world. and they're not that unique. It's sometimes I think the people these things are happening to are more normal than the so-called normal people out there. But I've heard so many of the same stories over and over again about strange happenings that I do know these things are real. But anyway, then I formed my own company, and I'm now publishing many, many other authors because we've been in business since 1991. And one of our authors is the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. I was very honored to be able to publish his book about his grandmother and grandfather. And I'm involved with people just everywhere. And we have many other wonderful authors that I'll be interviewing in the days to come. I just thought of something. Someone just called me the other day at this conference we're going to be going to. He said he was reading the new book, The Convoluted Universe, Book 2. And he was reading it to him and his wife. He said they lay in bed at night reading to each other. And they were toward the end of the book. And he said he came across a piece of information that he had never heard before. And he said it was talking about the solar activity on the sun and how this was being influenced by the mass consciousness of the people on Earth. And I was thinking, well, I don't remember those exact words. I do remember talking earlier in the book about the sun and the planets, but I didn't remember those exact words. But he said it was in the end of the book, the last few pages. It impressed him. Anyway, he said the next day he went back to the book to see if he could find it again, and it wasn't there. Now, other people have told me they've gotten things out of my books that I haven't written. And they, the guides, the guardians, the ones who come through the people I work with, said there is much more in your books than you can possibly imagine. There are things between the lines. There's information there that people get without really reading it. It goes into their mind. I don't know if this is what they meant or what. But there's another case of something very strange happening. And how can I doubt it? Because I know these many different strange things do happen when people read my books and are around them. I don't know, whatever. But what he had read in the book wasn't there. He said, did I slip into another dimension for that time? Or was I maybe reading the ending of your next book, Book 3 of the Convoluted Universe series? And I said, who's to say? Because I have enough information for the Book 3 of the series. I just haven't begun to put it together yet. So who's to say? There's many strange things out here that we don't know, and we don't have any way of knowing about any of these things. So it's just part of the excitement with it. Now, how in the world can people not have magic in their lives? There's so much around us, everything, that I just keep looking for more and more. I know there's more. There's more to come. I've been told that in the beginning I was given what I could take. When I began